when my son Bradley stood in the middle of my small apartment, looked around with undisguised contempt, and said, "Dad, this place is pathetic. No wonder Mom left you. You'll never amount to anything." I felt something inside me break, but not in the way he expected. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend myself or justify my life choices. Instead, I looked at this 38-year-old man I'd raised, supported, and loved unconditionally for nearly 4 decades, and I smiled. "You might be right, son," I said calmly. His new wife Amber smirked from behind him, her designer handbag probably worth more than my monthly rent. They thought they'd won something. They thought they'd finally put the old man in his place. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have possibly known, was that by the end of the week, I would purchase a downtown penthouse, cut Bradley completely out of my will, and reveal a secret I'd been keeping for 20 years. They thought they were dealing with a pathetic failure who painted landscapes as a hobby. They were about to discover they'd just insulted one of the most successful artists in the country. And that was just the beginning. My name is Walter Thornton, and for the past 20 years, I've been living a carefully constructed double life that would make any spy jealous. To my son Bradley, I was just Dad, the guy who lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood, who painted pretty pictures of mountains and valleys, who was always good for a loan when times got tough. The divorced father who never quite recovered after his wife left him 15 years ago. To the art world, I was W.D. Morrison, a reclusive, mysterious artist whose landscape paintings sold for anywhere from $40,000 to $85,000 each. An enigma who refused interviews, never attended gallery openings, and communicated exclusively through my agent and gallery director. Why the double life? That's the question everyone asks when they learn the truth. The answer is simple. I wanted my art to succeed or fail on its own merits, not because of my personal story or connections. In the art world, mystery sells. A quiet painter named Walter Thornton from Cleveland? Nobody cares. But W.D. Morrison, the reclusive genius who refuses to be photographed? That's a story collectors pay premium prices for. But there was another reason, one I'm less proud of. I wanted to see who really cared about me versus who cared about what I could give them. For 30 years, I supported Bradley through everything. Private elementary school tuition when public schools weren't good enough, $28,000. High school at Winchester Prep, $96,000 over 4 years. College at Northwestern, I covered what scholarships didn't, another $43,000. His failed graphic design business, $15,000 to get started, which disappeared within 6 months. His wedding to his first wife, $12,000 for a ceremony that ended in divorce 2 years later. I kept meticulous records of every check, every wire transfer, every envelope of cash I handed over when he called with another emergency. Not because I expected repayment, they were gifts, given freely out of love, but because some part of me, even then, understood that I needed to protect myself. The total came to $187,000 over 15 years. Money I earned selling paintings under my pseudonym while living in my modest apartment and driving my 15-year-old Honda Civic. Bradley never asked where the money came from. He just assumed his father was scraping by, sacrificing his own comfort to support his son's dreams. He never wondered how a man living on what he assumed was a modest pension could write $5,000 checks without flinching. He never asked because he never really saw me. I was just a resource, not a person. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday evening that started like a nightmare and ended as the catalyst for everything that followed. Bradley called that morning. "Dad, Amber and I want to come over tonight. We need to discuss something important about your future. Your future, not our relationship. Not how are you doing. Your future, like I was a problem that needed solving." They arrived at 6:30, both dressed in clothes that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Bradley wore a designer suit from his marketing job, the one I'd helped him get by paying for the certifications he needed. Amber wore a dress that probably cost $800 and carried a handbag I recognized from a magazine as costing $3,000. They sat on my old couch, the same couch Bradley had grown up jumping on, the same couch where I'd read him bedtime stories when he was 5, and looked around my apartment with barely concealed disgust. My apartment isn't a palace, but it's mine. 1 bedroom, a decent kitchen, and a spare room I converted into a studio. The furniture is older but well-maintained. The walls are covered with my paintings, landscapes from places I'd traveled to find perfect light, perfect compositions, perfect moments captured in oil and canvas. To me, those paintings represented my life's work, my passion, my purpose. To them, they were just proof of my failure. "Dad, we need to talk," Bradley began, using that careful tone people use when they're about to tell you something they've already decided. "Amber and I have been discussing your future, and we think it's time you considered moving to an assisted living facility." I stared at him, genuinely shocked. "I'm 72 and in perfect health. Why would I need assisted living?" Amber jumped in, her voice dripping with false concern. "Walter, let's be realistic here. You're living alone, painting pictures that nobody buys, struggling to make ends meet. We're worried about you." "I'm not struggling," I said quietly. "I'm perfectly comfortable." Bradley gestured around the apartment. "Dad, look at this place. You're living in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that's barely safe. You drive a car that's older than my marriage. You dress like you shop at thrift stores." "I do shop at thrift stores," I said. "There's nothing wrong with that. There is when you're 72 years old and should be enjoying your retirement." Bradley's voice was rising now, frustration bleeding through his fake concern. "Instead, you're living like a college student, spending all your time on paintings that will never sell, refusing to accept reality." That's when he said the words that destroyed our relationship forever. "Dad, this place is pathetic. No wonder Mom left you. You'll never amount to anything." The room went silent. Even Amber looked slightly uncomfortable, like maybe Bradley had gone too far. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. A cruel, entitled stranger who viewed his own father as nothing more than an embarrassment and an obligation. "You might be right, son," I said calmly, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Bradley took that as agreement, as validation of his cruelty. "I'm glad you're finally seeing sense. Amber found a great facility about an hour from here. It's affordable, and they have activities for seniors. We can schedule a tour this weekend. We'll help you pack," Amber added, as if doing me some tremendous favor. "And we can donate all these paintings to charity. Clear out the clutter so your place looks better for potential buyers." They left 20 minutes later, satisfied they'd solved the problem of me. Bradley even hugged me at the door, a performative gesture that made my skin crawl. After they left, I sat in my studio, surrounded by paintings they'd called worthless clutter, and made a decision that would change all our lives. The next morning, I woke up early and did something I'd been putting off for weeks. I called my gallery director, Helen Ashworth. Helen and I have worked together for 18 years. She discovered me at a small regional exhibition, saw potential in my work, and agreed to represent me under the pseudonym I chose. She's one of 3 people in the world who know that W.D. Morrison and Walter Thornon are the same person. She's also become one of my closest friends, though we've never met in person, another quirk of my double life that's about to change. "Walter." Her voice was bright with excitement. "I was just about to call you. I have extraordinary news about the Seasons of Solitude series." My heart started beating faster. The Seasons of Solitude series was 12 paintings I completed over the past 3 years, 4 paintings for each season, capturing the same valley in different light, different weather, different moods. It was my best work, the culmination of everything I'd learned over 20 years of serious painting. "A private collector in Singapore has been following your work for 5 years, Helen continued. "He wants to purchase the entire series. All 12 paintings. Walter, he's offering $1.2 million. I sat down hard on my couch, the same couch where Bradley and Amber had sat hours earlier, calling my life pathetic. $1.2 million. For paintings my son planned to donate to charity because nobody would want them. "Walter, are you still there?" "I'm here," I managed. "I'm just processing. I know it's a lot to take in. Obviously, you don't have to accept. We could sell them individually over time, possibly get more money that way. But having them stay together as a collection, with a serious collector who will preserve them, that's rare." My phone buzzed with a text message. It was Bradley. "Dad, Amber found a great place. Meadowbrook Senior Living. Can we schedule a tour for Saturday?" I stared at that message for a long moment. Then I made a decision that would set everything that followed into motion. "Helen, I want to accept the offer. But I want something else too. Name it. I want to reveal my identity. Publicly. I want to schedule a gallery event where I step out from behind the pseudonym and let people see who W.D. Morrison really is." There was a long pause on the other end. Walter, are you sure? You've been so careful about your privacy for 20 years. What's changed? Everything, I said simply. Schedule the event for this Saturday night at the gallery. Make it news. Contact every art critic, every collector, every journalist who's ever written about W.D. Morrison. Tell them the artist is finally stepping out of the shadows. This is going to be huge, Helen said, and I could hear the excitement building in her voice. The art world has been speculating about your identity for years. This will be the event of the season. Good, I said, because I want my son to be there when it happens. Over the next 5 days, I systematically prepared for what would either be the most satisfying or most disastrous evening of my life. First, I contacted my estate attorney, Francine Weber. Francine has handled my legal affairs for the past decade, managing the trust once set up to separate my W.D. Morrison income from my Walter Thornton identity. Francine, I need to make significant changes to my will. We met in her office downtown, where I explained everything that had happened with Bradley. She listened without interruption, her expression growing darker as I described the dinner conversation. I want Bradley removed from my will entirely, I told her. Everything goes to charity. The Cleveland Art Education Foundation, the Homeless Veterans Art Therapy Program, and the Scholarship Fund at Cleveland Institute of Art. Walter, I have to ask, are you sure? This is your son we're talking about. Maybe he was just having a bad day, said things he didn't mean. I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made the next day. Yes, I'd set up a recorder in my apartment. After years of feeling like something was off about Bradley's visits, I'd finally decided to trust my instincts. I told him I'd be out Thursday afternoon running errands, knowing he had a key to my apartment that I'd given him years ago for emergencies. The recording captured everything. Amber's voice came through clearly. God, this place depresses me. How long do we have to keep pretending to care about the old man? Bradley's response was even worse. Just until we get him moved into that facility. Then we can sell this place and pocket whatever equity he has. We're not paying for his care. I've been working on Mom. If I tell her Dad's getting senile, she'll cover the costs out of guilt. There was the sound of them moving through my apartment, opening drawers and cabinets. What about all these paintings? Amber asked. They're taking up so much space. Bradley laughed, actually laughed. Nobody wants amateur landscape art. We'll donate them to Goodwill or just throw them away when we clean this place out. Either way, they're not worth the trouble of trying to sell. I stopped the recording. Francine looked physically ill. Draw up the papers, I said. Remove Bradley completely. I want this ironclad. No way for him to contest it after I'm gone. Consider it done, Francine said quietly. Walter, I'm so sorry. No parent should have to hear their child talk about them that way. The second piece of my plan involved documenting everything I'd given Bradley over the years. I went through 15 years of bank statements, tax records, and personal files, creating a comprehensive spreadsheet of every dollar I'd sent his way. The total was even higher than I'd remembered, $187,342. Each entry had a date, an amount, and a note about what Bradley had told me the money was for. Some entries made me laugh bitterly. Emergency car repair, $3,200. Saw him post photos of a ski trip to Colorado that same week. Business equipment, $5,000. The equipment never materialized. Medical bills, $2,800. He had insurance through his employer. I'd been a fool, believing every sob story, every urgent request. But I'd also been a father who wanted to help his son. There's no shame in that, even if it was taken advantage of. The third piece was the most important, making sure Bradley and Amber would actually attend the gallery event. I called Bradley on Thursday afternoon. Son, I've been thinking about what you said the other night. Dad, I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. His voice was patronizing, like he was talking to a child. I've decided to make some changes. Big changes. And before I do, I want to have one last gathering at my studio, a goodbye party for my painting days. Will you and Amber come? Saturday night, 7 o'clock. Sure, Dad. Where is it? I gave him the address of the Ashworth Gallery downtown. It's a gallery that displays local artists' work. They've agreed to let me use their space for the evening. That's great, Dad. Really great. This is a healthy step for you. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. The final piece came together Friday morning when Helen called with the media response. Walter, this is going to be massive. Every major art publication wants to be there. The Cleveland Tribune is sending their arts editor. Even some national outlets are flying people in. The mystery of W.D. Morrison has been one of the art world's favorite topics for years. Perfect, I said. Make sure there are plenty of cameras. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes everything feel significant. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not expensive, but well-tailored and appropriate. I wanted to look like myself, not like I was trying to be someone I wasn't. I arrived at the Ashworth Gallery at 6:30, 30 minutes before guests would start arriving. Helen was already there, overseeing final preparations. "Walter," she said, seeing me in person for the first time in 18 years of working together. "It's really you." We hugged, and I realized we were both crying a little. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "More ready than I've ever been for anything." The gallery had been transformed. My paintings, not just the Seasons of Solitude series, but selections from my entire 20-year career, hung on the walls in perfect lighting. Each one had a small placard with the title, year, and the sale price, marked as sold for most of them. The prices told their own story: $42,000, $67,000, $85,000. 20 years of work that my son thought was worthless. Guests began arriving at 7. First the serious collectors, then the critics, then the curious art lovers who'd heard whispers that something big was happening tonight. By 7:15, the gallery was packed with easily 200 people. Bradley and Amber arrived at 7:20, and I watched their faces as they took in the crowd. They were confused, clearly wondering why their father's goodbye party looked more like a major art world event. Bradley spotted me near the back of the gallery and waved, making his way through the crowd with Amber trailing behind. "Dad, what's going on? You said this was a small gathering." "Plans changed," I said simply. "The gallery director wanted to make it special." "This is a lot," Amber said, looking around at the well-dressed crowd. "Are these all your friends?" "Some of them," I said. "The rest are here for the announcement." "What announcement?" Before I could answer, Helen stepped to the microphone at the front of the gallery. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for what I can honestly say is the most significant event in the Ashworth Gallery's 30-year history." The crowd quieted immediately, all eyes turning to Helen. For 20 years, I have had the privilege of representing one of the most talented landscape artists of our generation. His work has been featured in galleries across the country and collected by some of the world's most discerning art enthusiasts. His paintings have sold for as much as $85,000. I watched Bradley's face. He was still confused, clearly not understanding why Helen was talking about some famous artist at his father's party. But in all that time, Helen continued, "W.D. Morrison has remained anonymous. He has refused interviews, avoided public appearances, and maintained absolute privacy about his personal life. The art world has respected his wishes, even as curiosity about his identity has grown with each passing year." Now Bradley was starting to look uncomfortable, like he was beginning to suspect something but couldn't quite put the pieces together. Tonight, for the first time, W.D. Morrison has agreed to step out of anonymity. Tonight, he will reveal himself to the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the man behind the brush. Walter Thornton. The applause was thunderous. Camera flashes popped from every direction. People were standing, clapping, some even cheering. And in the middle of the crowd, my son's face had gone completely white. I walked to the front of the gallery, shaking Helen's hand before taking the microphone. The applause continued for what felt like minutes before finally settling into expectant silence. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for the incredible support you've shown my work over the years." I paused, gathering my thoughts for what came next. "I want to tell you a story about why I chose to reveal my identity tonight, of all nights. It's a story about family, about value, and about the difference between what things cost and what they're worth." The crowd was absolutely silent now, hanging on every word. 3 weeks ago, someone very close to me looked at my life and told me I would never amount to anything. They looked at the apartment where I live, the clothes I wear, the life I've chosen, and called it pathetic. They said my paintings were worthless, that nobody would ever want them, that they should be thrown away or donated to charity. I could see people in the crowd glancing around, trying to figure out who I was talking about. Some had already spotted Bradley, whose face had gone from white to red. That person was my son. Every eye in the gallery turned to Bradley. Cameras swiveled in his direction. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. For 30 years, I supported my son financially. Private schools, college tuition, failed business ventures, weddings. I lived modestly so I could help him whenever he called. Over 15 years, I gave him $187,342. Gasps rippled through the crowd. That was serious money, even to this wealthy audience. I never asked for repayment. They were gifts, given out of love. But I also never told him where the money came from. I never told him about my art career, about the paintings that were selling, about the double life I was living. I pulled out my phone and held it up. This week, I learned what my son really thinks of me. I'd like you to hear it in his own words. I pressed play, and Bradley's voice filled the gallery through the sound system Helen had thoughtfully set up. Just until we get him moved into that facility. Then we can sell his place and pocket whatever equity he has. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Whispers of shock, sounds of disgust. Then Amber's voice. What about all these paintings? And Bradley's response. Nobody wants amateur landscape art. We'll donate them to Goodwill, or just throw them away. I stopped the recording. The silence in the gallery was deafening. Those paintings he planned to throw away, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence, have sold for up to $85,000 each. The Seasons of Solitude series you see behind me, which he would have donated to Goodwill, just sold for $1.2 million. More gasps. Someone in the back actually shouted, "No way." Several people were openly staring at Bradley now, their expressions ranging from shock to contempt. I pulled a document from my jacket pocket. Yesterday, I met with my attorney and removed my son from my will entirely. My estate. Everything I've earned from 20 years as W.D. Morrison will go to art education charities and programs that help people who actually need support. I turned to look directly at Bradley and Amber, who were frozen in the center of the gallery like deer in headlights. You told me I needed to face reality, Bradley. You were right. The reality is that I'm not the pathetic failure you thought I was. I'm not dependent on your pity or your charity. I'm not an embarrassment you need to hide away in a facility. My voice was steady, calm, with no trace of anger or bitterness. Just cold, hard truth. The reality is that I'm a successful artist who chose to live modestly so I could support a son I loved. The reality is that you valued me so little that you plotted to institutionalize me and throw away the life's work you never bothered to understand. The reality is that you're not my family anymore. Because as of tonight, I don't have a son. The crowd was completely silent. Some people were crying. Others were nodding in approval. Everyone was staring at Bradley. I'm not doing this for revenge, I continued, turning back to address the full audience. I'm doing this because I finally learned to value myself as much as I valued him. I'm doing this because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who can't see your worth. I handed the microphone back to Helen. Thank you for coming tonight. The paintings are available to view, and Helen can answer any questions about my work. As for me, I'm going to go home to the life I chose, the life I built, the life that makes me happy, regardless of whether it looks impressive enough to satisfy someone else's expectations. The applause started small, then built into a standing ovation. People were clapping not just for my art, but for the stand I'd taken, for the dignity I'd reclaimed. I walked through the crowd toward the exit. People patted my shoulder, offered congratulations, asked for autographs. I acknowledged them all politely, but kept moving. As I passed Bradley and Amber, they were surrounded by a circle of empty space. No one wanted to stand near them. Amber looked mortified. Bradley looked broken. "Dad," he said, reaching out to grab my arm. "Dad, please, can we talk about this?" I gently removed his hand from my arm. "No, Bradley. We can't. You made your feelings clear. I'm simply respecting them." I didn't mean it. I was frustrated. I said things I shouldn't have. "You meant every word," I said quietly. "The only thing you regret is getting caught. The only thing that bothers you is that everyone here now knows who you really are." I walked out of the gallery into the cool evening air, leaving my son standing in the ruins of the relationship he'd destroyed. The aftermath, 16 to 1900 hours. The next week was a whirlwind I could never have anticipated. The story went viral, not just in art world circles, but everywhere. Artist reveals secret identity, disowns greedy son, became headline news across social media. The recording of Bradley and Amber plotting against me was shared millions of times. My paintings became even more sought after, with collectors clamoring for any W.D. Morrison work they could acquire. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Interview requests from morning shows, podcasts, newspapers, magazines. Everyone wanted to know more about the reclusive artist who'd lived a double life and then dramatically cut off his ungrateful son. I declined almost all of them. The gallery event had said everything I needed to say, but there were calls I did take. On Monday morning, I formally served Bradley with a demand for repayment of the $187,342 I'd given him over the years. My attorney included copies of every check, every wire transfer, every documented gift, along with Bradley's recorded admission that he planned to take advantage of me financially. Mr. Thornton has documentation proving these were gifts, not loans, Francine explained in her letter. However, given the recorded evidence of your intent to defraud him through institutionalization and theft of his property, we are prepared to pursue both civil and criminal charges unless full repayment is arranged. I also had Francine file a cease and desist order, legally banning Bradley and Amber from my property and requiring all future communication to go through my attorney. Bradley tried to call 47 times in the first 3 days. I blocked his number. He tried email. I filtered those too. He showed up at my apartment building, but the doorman, who'd seen the news, turned him away. On Wednesday, I did something I'd been dreaming about for years. I went apartment hunting in the downtown Loft district. The place I found was perfect. Top floor of a converted warehouse, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides that flooded the space with natural light. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, modern kitchen, and most importantly, a massive open area perfect for a studio where I could paint to my heart's content. The price was steep, $3,000 a month, but I could easily afford it now. Hell, I could have bought the entire building with my recent sale. But I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I just needed a space that made me happy. I signed the lease that afternoon and moved in the following weekend with the help of a professional moving company. They carefully transported my paintings, my supplies, my modest furniture, and the few personal items that mattered to me. Bradley's childhood photos stayed in a box in storage. I wasn't ready to throw them away, but I also couldn't look at them yet. The most unexpected development came 2 weeks after the gallery event. I received a call from my ex-wife, Carol, Bradley's mother. "Walter," she said, her voice cautious. "Can we talk?" We met for coffee at a neutral location downtown. I arrived prepared for confrontation, for her to defend Bradley, to tell me I was wrong to cut him off. Instead, she hugged me and started crying. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Walter, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he'd become that person. When did our son turn into someone so cruel?" We talked for 2 hours. Carol told me that Bradley had been feeding her a completely different story, that I was becoming senile, that I was living in dangerous conditions, that she needed to help fund my care because I was too proud to accept assistance. "I've been sending him money every month for the past year," she admitted. $2,000 a month that I thought was going toward your care. He told me you were too stubborn to accept help directly, so he was managing it for you. So Bradley had been scamming his mother too. Another $24,000 extracted through lies and manipulation. When I saw the news about the gallery event, I realized everything he'd told me was a lie, Carol said. "Walter, you were never senile. You were building something extraordinary while he was plotting to steal from you. Did you know about the art?" I asked. She shook her head. "I had no idea. In all the years we were married, I thought your painting was just a hobby. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I wanted to know if you loved me for me, not for what I could provide. I wanted our relationship to be about connection, not compensation." Carol was quiet for a long moment. "Is that why you never fought for more in the divorce? You could have taken everything, but you just let me have the house, most of the savings." I always wondered why. Because I could afford to be generous. And because I wanted to know if you'd chosen to leave because you genuinely wanted something different, or because you thought I had nothing to offer. "I left because we'd grown apart," Carol said softly. "Because we wanted different things from life. But Walter, I never thought you were a failure. I never mocked your dreams. And I certainly never would have encouraged our son to treat you the way he has. We parted on better terms than we'd been on in 15 years. Carol promised to cut off Bradley's care funding, and to stop enabling his behavior. He needs to face consequences, she said. Real ones. Maybe this is the wake-up call he needs to become a better person. I wasn't as optimistic as she was, but I appreciated that she was finally seeing the truth. The unexpected reconciliation, 19 to 2200 hours. 3 months after the gallery event, I was settling into my new life with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. My loft had become exactly what I'd hoped for, a sanctuary where I could paint, think, and simply exist without judgment or expectations. I'd set up my studio in the main room, with easels positioned to catch the changing light throughout the day. The Seasons of Solitude series had sold, but I'd negotiated to keep high-quality reproductions for my own walls. My new series, Reckoning, was taking shape. These weren't landscapes like my previous work. They were more abstract, more emotional. Paintings that captured the feeling of letting go, of standing up for yourself, of finding peace after pain. The art world remained fascinated by my story. Sales of my work had tripled, with collectors paying premium prices for anything with the W.D. Morrison name attached. But more gratifying than the money was the correspondence I received from other artists, particularly older ones who'd been told they were past their prime. Your story gave me courage to keep creating, one 78-year-old painter wrote. I thought I was too old to matter anymore. Thank you for showing me that age brings wisdom, not obsolescence. Bradley continued making small monthly payments toward his debt, $500 each month, automatically deducted from his checking account per our legal agreement. At that rate, it would take him 31 years to pay off what he owed me. He'd be 69 years old when the debt was finally cleared. Somehow, that felt appropriate. But the real surprise came on a Tuesday afternoon when my building's doorman called up to my loft. Mr. Thornton, there are 2 young people here asking to see you. They say they're your grandchildren. I'd been so focused on cutting Bradley out of my life that I hadn't considered the collateral damage. My grandchildren, Chloe, who'd just turned 19, and Owen, who was 17, hadn't done anything wrong. They'd simply been caught in the crossfire of their father's choices. Send them up, I said, my heart pounding. A few minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find 2 young adults I barely recognized. I'd seen Chloe and Owen maybe 5 times in the past 3 years. Always brief visits where Bradley controlled the conversation and rushed them away before we could really connect. Grandpa, Chloe said hesitantly. Can we come in? Of course. I stepped aside, letting them enter the loft. They looked around with wide eyes, taking in the space, the paintings, the evidence of a life they'd never known I was living. This is amazing, Owen said softly. Dad told us you lived in a tiny apartment that was falling apart. Your father told you a lot of things that weren't true, I said carefully. Please sit down. Can I get you something to drink? We sat in my living area, a comfortable arrangement of furniture near the windows with a view of downtown Cleveland. For a few awkward moments, nobody knew quite what to say. Finally, Chloe broke the silence. We saw the Tribune article about the gallery event, and the video that everyone was sharing online. I'm sorry you had to find out that way, I said. I never wanted to hurt you too. You didn't hurt us, Owen said firmly. Dad did. Grandpa, we had no idea he was treating you like that. We had no idea you were this successful artist. Dad always told us you were broke, and we couldn't visit because you were embarrassed about your situation. He kept us away from you, Chloe added, and I could hear the anger in her voice. All these years, he controlled when we could see you, what we could talk about. He made us think you were this sad, struggling old man, when really you were just living your life the way you wanted to.
If this story got you thinking, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that hit deep, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this one, share it with them. Thanks for watching.